welcome to this September edition of From the Horsebox. I'm Claire.
And I'm Kate. Today we are celebrating our 10th episode with a podcast party with a very special guest.
We had to work very hard to book ourselves into his busy work diary, but he is someone who makes time for worthy projects like ours.
Before we have the big reveal, Claire, what have you been up to since our last time on air?
Well, I've been taking the girls to their jobs at Bewilderwood, which is doing fantastic things, letting young children tramp around outdoors and build dens. And Tim has been to the far north of Scotland for a very successful fishing trip and brought home 1 out of 3 fish caught. What's the flying granny been up to?
I snuck in another EasyJet trip to see Cosmo, Figgy, Marcella. Nigel stayed at home. Did you know that the Jersey Islanders were so keen on knitting that their fishing stocks dwindled? So in 1608, knitting was banned in the prime fishing months of August and September. But I don't somehow think Nigel stayed at home to knit booties in Wales.
Well, I think Nigel's a man of many talents. Back to the podcast. I remember celebrating our 10th wedding anniversary with tin, but I don't know what it is for a podcast 10th episode. Well, let's just celebrate anyway. Cheers.
We are delighted to welcome Dominic Curran from Shropshire, who has a wide knowledge of the countryside and its management. He leads a very busy life and will keep us well entertained.
Welcome, Dom. I hope you got a drink of your choice ready for our celebration podcast party.
I have indeed. Thank you very much indeed. The gin and tonic, very nice too.
That's excellent. Now we're going to head straight into your sporting life. Your earliest memories, Dom, were of fishing in Ireland as a small boy on a family property there. Was that an island, a farm? And have you continued this pastime? Do you still enjoy fishing?
Yeah, absolutely, in answer to that one. So it was basically my grandfather had this wonderful little island called Dinish, and it was in the very southwest of Ireland in County Kerry in the Kenmare estuary. And it's about a mile in circumference. So obviously boats and water were very high on the activity list. And so I started off, I think, sort of probably mackerel fishing as a nipper, which is always great fun, with the old traces and the feathers and everything. And if the squeals of delight if you had a full house of 6 fish was just spectacular. And then we graduated on, as we got a little bit older, to actually a bit more sort of deep sea fishing. So you were trying to catch things like sort of spur dogs and dogfish and stingrays, what we call rays. And then I think the biggest thing my brother actually caught was a conger eel, which is about 45 pounds. Wow. So that cleared the boat deck pretty quickly when that came on board, so thrashing around the place. And I've kept on doing it really, and most years we tend to go away, been over to Russia a few times over there. You fly into Murmansk and then you get a helicopter out over the tundra.
As you do, for about an hour and a half, 2 hours. And we went out there early, sort of 2000, so you get in this sort of Soviet gunship with a few Afghanistan bullet holes in it and hope you make it. And then you land in the middle of this sort of wilderness where there is absolutely no light pollution, no noise pollution, anything, and really pristine fishing. Because it's looked after by the Russian authorities, and they have a wonderful run of fish, and so you can catch sort of 15 to 20 pound fish, and then the occasional 30 pounder. And do you keep the fish? Are you allowed to
we take a couple for the table because obviously you can't bring them home because they're too far away. But they will do sort of sushis and gravlax and all that sort of stuff.
So they welcome the sport, do they? The Russians?
Very much so. Yeah, very much so.
And you get the vodka to go
and
with
lots
it?
of vodka toasting afterwards, lots of prosht and all that sort of stuff. And then we've been to Iceland a couple of times as well, which is great. And I go up to Scotland most years. In the last few years, been going up to a place called Loch Maree, which is up on the west coast, up near Gairloch, which is a very short little river. It's only about 2 miles long, but it runs straight from the sea into Loch Maree. And I mean, just anecdotally, it's really fascinating. This year, it was a really well-known river and a loch for sea trout. And I don't know if you're
have any awareness of sea trout's fortunes have been really in decline for about the last sort of 30 years with the advent of fish farming.
Right.
Because they're a coastal fish, so they're going up and down, and these fish farms are in the sort of sheltered, shallow waters. So they have a huge amount of lice rather, on the fish, and that, of course, kills...
Caught from the fish
Caught
farms.
from the fish farm, exactly. Anyway, they got rid of the fish farm at the bottom. And so this year is the first year that sea trout have been coming back in really good numbers. And big, biggish for that, 3-pounders. And in big numbers. So it's just really exciting, and it's very interesting trying to work out the correlation between fish farming and its impact on the environment against the natural
So the
fish.
sea trout are coming back because they've curtailed the farm.
The farm is gone, and so therefore the fish are now coming back, and the survivability is higher, and they will then spawn themselves, and that will hopefully generate more and more fish. So there were 30 boats that used to operate on Loch Marie in the 1980s, and now there are 2. It's so good for the local economy, the pubs and the restaurants and all the rest of it. It's just a great benefit.
Yeah. It's fascinating. To come closer to home, you were brought up in Staffordshire, where your parents farmed at Acton Trussell and had your first days hunting with the North Staffs. Can you tell us who was hunting the hounds and any early hunting memories?
Yeah, so really it was my grandfather who was the sort of most influential male, I think, really, because my father left home quite early. Parents got divorced, and we didn't see much of him. But I remember I was 7, and it was at a place called Equestrian Castle, which is owned by the Carter family, and my grandfather was sort of quite entwined in the North Staffs, because he did a little bit of the mastership, and then he was a long time chairman. He was actually I think Roger Hewitt was a master with my grandfather, because he was North Staffs pre Winstay. And the huntsman then was a chap called Pat Languish, I think he was called. And it's an old English pack, and they're kennelled near Newcastle. And I remember going to the meet and seeing this amazing lady turning up on an absolutely white grey horse.
Who was that?
Lady Congreve, who was riding side saddle and wearing a habit, and just looked amazing. As a little kid, I'd never seen anything quite like that in my life before. And then I remember vividly her being pulled out of a hedge because she'd ended up upside down, had a complete crash.
Brave lady.
So that's how that was my memory, really.
So you moved to Shropshire, 1981,
Yeah.
and you went into the army. How long were you in Germany, and how was your German?
Joined the army, and so I joined a regiment called the 15th 19th Hussars, and they were based in a place called Detmold, which is sort of northern Germany. And German, it's sufficient. So you need to know a few key phrases. Guten Morgen, good morning.
Really showing off now.
And then it's noch ein großer Bitter beer, großer
We know what that
bitter,
is.
which we of course. And I think you've covered the essentials, therefore, of life, haven't you?
Now, there was a bloodhound pack, the Weser Vale, run by the army, but it was started by British officers, wasn't
It was formed, I think, in about 1969, and the Household Cavalry were based in the barracks that we were in, and so they effectively took over the running of the hunt. Yeah, and it was a pack of bloodhounds. We walked one called Limerick, and of course, with English puppies, Winstay puppies, you have them at home, don't you, for probably 12, maybe 16 weeks, and then they lift their head and they sense the wind and they're off, aren't they? They're just gone, So, and for us, we walked them for years and years and years, but, once they headed for Millwood, the Spoutwood, the Lomax Wood, that was time for them to go back home again. You have them for a long time, and you're living in a very small army quarter, and hounds get really big. And so, he just used to take up the whole sofa by the time he went back.
He became a real friend.
And then he's great.
So was he yours or the whole
No,
regiment?
he's Vaisaville. We were just a walk.
Oh, right. So he lived in the mess and...
He came with us everywhere, exactly, into the mess and all that sort of stuff, and down to we had the stable block down there and everything. So he was
Did
with
he
us.
become like like when you have an army mascot type of thing?
Yeah, he was all over the shop, exactly, running out of control. And his great achievement was he drank a whole bucket of cod liver oil, I seem to remember, which had a really hideous effect on both ends. And he just poured grease for about a week out of his coat.
So did you meet some interesting German hunting people like Baron von Weser, or were there some interesting...
There weren't great families. It was more sort of local, businessmen and people like that. But the German sport was very difficult because they have, especially shooting, for instance, you have to take an exam over there called the Jagdschein. And I think it's a really good idea that actually should probably be invoked in the UK, actually, because it's all to do with sort of quarry recognition, the habitat, the management thereof. It's not all just about turn up and go bang, that you have to have a deep understanding. And I think that's what we lack in the UK, actually.
So can you tell us a little bit about the friendships you made in Detmold in the army, and something about the army life, obviously the good parts, but what about the harder parts of life there?
I think the most important thing, or the best thing, I think, is the friendship that you build with your sort of brother officers. You're abroad. You've only got each other to rely on as such. There was integration, obviously, in the local population, but not an enormous amount because you were there predominantly working.
You were quite young too.
Yeah, well, I was 23, I think, exactly, and because I'd been to Cirencester and then joined the army. A lot of people went straight from school into the army, and so you're young and impressionable, and you need your mates, and so you forge really lifelong relationships with them. We always used to have nicknames in the regiment.
Oh, go on.
And so we had a chap called Bender.
Yes.
Bender was very good at bending beer cans. We had a chap called Floppy Hutton.
Don't think we want to know about
Floppy
him.
Hutton, no, it's not what you think. He went to go and meet the commanding officer, having just arrived for his sort of first interview, and immediately fainted in front of him. So he was known as Floppy.
What was yours then, Dom?
Well, I was called Murph because of my Irish connections. And so if I see any of the fellas in the regiment now, it's always, "Hi Murph, how are you?"
Yeah.
It's not Dom or anything like that.
On the more serious side of Her Majesty's forces, can you tell us what was sort of going on in the world when you were there, and what made you want to join in the first place, really?
So obviously it was what's now referred to as the Cold War. And effectively, if you remember what happened at the end of the war, the Russians got to Berlin, and then was a great fear with the Americans, British and the French that they might keep on coming.
Yes.
And so effectively that's what we did. We just formed a sort of a huge, great big barrier to try and hem them in if they had an intention to come across. And who knows whether they ever wanted to or would have done, but we were there to stop them. And that was the purpose. That was our remit, to make sure that you could engage them very quick.
So you were tank trained?
Yeah, so we operated a thing called the Chieftain tank, so known as an MBT, a main battle tank. There was a regiment of those, and I think we had 56, I think it was, in my regiment. And there were about, I think when I joined, there were about 20 regiments, and there's a lot less now.
Yeah, I was going to say, how many are there now?
Yeah, a lot less than that. I can't tell you, to be frank. They're really good fun, because you do feel a bit indestructible in them.
Not for the poor German farmer who's...
They used to call, when we were, the best part of a tank is being on exercise. So when you deploy from the barracks and you go off and you play war games effectively for about a month at a time. And so you're sort of reenacting various scenarios.
And the Germans used to call it the third harvest because they used to park sort of derelict tractors and old Mercedes-Benz and things like that in big crops of maize and things like that, because you'd form up on your start line and it was sort of, right, you're going from A to B and you go there in a straight line. There's no we're not following sort of tracks and bridleways and things like that. You just went.
They loved it.
And they loved it because you go rumbling along through a maze field and suddenly get over some Mercedes-Benz which hadn't started for 10 years, and the German farmer would be straight on to the district valuer and say, my brand new Mercedes has just been trashed, that'll be 20,000 Deutschmarks, please.
Well, you didn't even feel that car underneath?
Well, not really, a little bit of a bump, but not really too much.
So you got to play polo, and what was your team called, Don?
Polo. So most of the cavalry regiments had a polo team, and it was so you've got sort of low, medium, and high girl. High girl was played by professional players. We were at the low end of the low goal polo era, I think, and we used to call ourselves the Detmold Nudgers because we all had really bad ponies who sort of, you lean out to take a shot and they sort of drift away. So there's quite a lot of air shots going on. And then when you hit it, it wasn't a sort of an 80-yard driller. It was sort of more like a sort of 20-yard sort of shuffle. But we did get better. We got better ponies, so we weren't that bad. But where we really excelled was in the bar afterwards. That's when we really won the game.
You could sort the other teams out there.
Exactly that. Really, really good fun. I had 3 ponies in my time over there. One was like sort of driving a bus. I mean, just really difficult to manoeuvre around the place. Another one who was quite talented, an absolute shocker in the stable. He'd turn his arse on you straight away as soon as you went in. So you had to have someone scurrying around the bars behind him to sort of coax him in the right direction.
Presumably you didn't do all the stable
No,
work.
luckily not. Trooper Mellis was my groom.
And Trooper Mellis.
Trooper Mellis. Oh, he earned his pay, for sure.
Obviously not the local Mellis that we all know.
And then I bought a little pony, a Shava, she was called, who was half New Forest, half polo pony. And she was the most wonderful creature. And we brought her back to England and then we hunted her.
All right, so she really took to it.
She did. She was great. She wasn't overly keen on a ditch toward, but you could sort of navigate your way around with her. But it was great.
So to go back to Cirencester, you studied for a diploma in farm management and also lived with a couple of jump jockeys who got you into your racing career. Tell us about that.
So lived my first year at Cirencester was with James Griffith, who, Trefnant Griffiths, and then Mark Smith, who's out that way, Denbighshire fellow. And Jim was a point-to-point jockey. And it was always
so
just
he was one of them, was he?
Well, he was the guy I lived with first, and he was always darting, getting ready for the season. And I just remember, and I kept on thinking, he really is going the extra mile, this fellow. And then I lived the second year with Tom Bannister, who was a Yorkshireman, and he was doing a lot of it. So he was darting, and it was quite funny. So once he started darting, we immediately went on to steak and champagne. This is a staple dart. So we weigh out on a Monday, and he would lose 2 pounds, and he took great delight in me putting on 2 pounds. But anyway, I just sort of was intrigued by it. It was always a dream to ride in a race, and I'm completely the wrong size. I'm 6'2". My natural weight's 14.5 stone, but that was my dream. And so when I left Germany in about 93, I think it was 94, I went off to Doncaster Sales and bought a schoolmaster. And so my first season was spent sort of getting around the track and understanding about, race riding, etc.
So one for the chief. Was that a coincidence that it was like chieftain tank? Or
No. He
Did you
was
name him that?
he was named when we bought him, and he was my final one. So I had a chap called Mr. Kelly, and then I was a horse. I shared a horse with who's aptly named Mr. Snail. Mr. Snail actually wasn't very snail-like. He was actually quite quick, and his jumping was a bit dodge. So we put a pro up on board to start with, and he didn't do very well. And we were just a bit. So I said to my co-owner, I said, "Look, I'll ride him," and we came second, which was great. And then we got in the frame again, and then sadly he broke down. And then I bought one for the chief, who was trained over near Wetherby by a chap called Simon Whitaker. And we got into the frame a bit, and we managed to stagger past the post first in Pendle Forest and Craven, point to point, the restricted race, 7th of May.
Oh, some big celebration. Well, you stuck at it through several horses till you got your goal.
Yeah, exactly. It's a sort of a Corinthian rider. You had one horse. It was only ever going to race 6 or 7 times a year. So it wasn't like you're part of a yard. And I rode up in Yorkshire as opposed to down here because there were more jockeys like me. Sort of have a go jockeys. It was great spirit, bloody good fun in the tent.
You had a few low points on the way, did you? Sort of
falling off. Oh yeah, big time. For the first race I ever rode in, actually, I could feel he's just getting a bit tired, and I just finished fence 15. I thought, well, I'll just hunt my way home, and completely inexperienced, and so we both crashed a rather big heap at the 16th, and I remember getting back on him. Luckily, he didn't go away because he was too tired to run on. So I got a leg up from St John as an ambulance fellow, and then we sort of plotted back in. And I remember my mother-in-law was saying, she was going, "Oh my God, Dominic, are you all right?" I said, "That's the most fun I've had for years. I've got to do that again." And it just really bit me. And then the other time I hit the deck was at Bramham. They used to race at Wetherby, and I got legged up and my britches split. And Simon Whitaker was leading me around and said, "Don't worry, Dom, that's a really good sign." But it didn't turn out that way because I went through the wing right in front of the crowd when they really ripped. And I had to have the walk of shame through the punters who were ripping up their betting slips in front of me. But it's all worth it. Anyway, and I won my race and I retired immediately.
Well, that's incredible. Now, there was another goal that you set yourself, and this must have been extremely exhilarating, the Cresta Run.
Cresta Run, yes. So it was, in the army again. It was an army thing, and so you went off down to St Moritz for about a month or so.
So they offered you a chance to be in it, or did you?
Yeah, so the army basically go down there for about 3 weeks exactly.
They thought it was part of a training.
Part of the training, exactly that. So because it's sort of quite high octane stuff. You're on a toboggan. It's only about 2 or 3 inches above an ice run. So it's not like bobsleigh where you're actually in a contained unit. It's just you and your sledge. And so you start off running from a place called Junction, which is about 3/4 of the way up the track. And you have to do 3 consecutive runs below 45 seconds to be able to qualify to go from top. And you can come off anywhere, but the notorious corner is a place called Shuttlecock Corner. And that is the safety valve. So if you're in the wrong position, if you're going too fast for your ability, that's where you ping out because you've got to be a bit sharper below there.
Have you got any, we've talked about steering tanks, but steering that, have you got any chance of steering it at all?
It's all weight distribution. It's just leaning in and leaning out.
Do you get time to do that?
Yeah, you do. That's the.
Is that bodily instinct?
It's part of it. Yeah, exactly. And I think it's like driving a car, isn't it? If you're driving a car and you're going around a left-handed bend, you're steering left and you're probably leaning left, aren't you? You might be unconscious of it, but you probably are. Do you know what I mean? So that is very, very exciting.
So all this was considered suitable to train you to go into battle. The Cresta Run, the polo. and the tank manoeuvres, you were all round. It was an all-round training.
I think actually, no, that was probably just sort of a Cresta. Probably, no, I don't think we can actually simulate that too much to battle skills, but
it's a test. It's a character test.
Yeah, I suppose so. But it's a reward probably actually more than anything for saying, hey, well done. Here's a bit of fun.
Yeah.
Work hard. This is a little bit of a reward.
Was Rosie there to cheer you on?
Yeah, she was with me, which was great. And you start first thing in the morning because it's very cold in the morning. You need the ice to be cold, and so you start early and you finish probably by about 11 o'clock, and then you can ski in the afternoon, which is. But
it's
great.
Also run by that army guy, isn't it?
Exactly.
So it's very tied into
exactly that.
The
It was
Army.
created by the English, wasn't it, in Switzerland?
Yeah. So was it Rosie who brought you to the Wednesday?
Was indeed exactly that. So Rosie and I started going out. I think it was about 84 or something like that. I think it was, and came up to the Wednesday.
What were your first impressions?
Big.
Oh God.
Big. Lots of people. Loads of you. North Staff's a big field, was like 40 or 50. And in those days, Saturday Wednesday fields were 100 and 110 sometimes, weren't they? But also really impressed by the fact that, predominantly then, very grassland orientated, a lot of dairy herds, weren't there? I think if you drew a line from Stafford to Shrewsbury to Chester, that triangle, I think, was about the most heavily dairy farmed area in Europe at that time. And it's probably changed a bit now.
You're right.
But the infrastructure is amazing as well because so much effort's gone into Wednesday country for so long. There is a place in and there's a place out, and wonderful hedges as well. But
and were you on Ormerod horses?
Yes, Captain John very kindly let me ride his horse called Tom Graney, and Tom Graney then came back to Colchester with us when I was stationed in Colchester, and he was a terrible spooker and was allergic to camouflage coats. So when he saw soldiers marching around the place, it was a real battle to keep him on the straight and narrow. And then James Ormond very kindly lent me a horse called Stanley. I remember that. So those were my first experiences, and they were very, very happy ones.
So when you were asked to field master as things went on, was that as daunting as some of these other exploits you've done down on the toboggan?
Yeah, yes. Equally.
Really?
Probably more. Because you've got to, the thing you're acutely aware of is you've got people behind you who, you're trying to look after. Mm. And you're trying to, be respectful for the landowner, keep the field. My view was always try and keep the field as close up as you possibly could without interfering, because that's what you should be doing. You should be understanding what the hounds are doing. It's not about crossing country, it's the whole package, isn't it? And without hounds, you don't cross the country.
Well, it's one of the most difficult jobs in my view, and not many people are able to do it.
If you've just got to prepare. And that means a lot of walking and, a lot of scenario playing in your own mind of what happens if this and that, and a bit of good luck and good horses. We're only as good as our horses, aren't we?
Well, you must have been good at it because Richard Tyack asked you to join the mastership, didn't he, in 2011?
Yes, and that was a real honour, actually, and a huge privilege. It was a role that I really, really enjoyed.
I think lots of people enjoyed you being there, Don.
Well, that's kind of you to say, but I really did enjoy it, and having the opportunity to sort of be a part of a huge organisation and with such long history, it was great, you did, obviously it comes a lot of responsibility, but I had great people to help me.
It's teamwork.
Do the work at home, in the office sort of type thing, because obviously you're out. But because setting up a day's hunting does take a long time.
Now, I do remember you had an unusual lorry, because I love lorries.
It was the Golden Maggot, I think. And then Rosie said, she said, right, I'm off to Leicestershire. And she came back and said, right, great, got the pony, got the lorry. I said, what colour? Oh, the lorry's golden and the horse is golden. I said, is the lorry okay? She said, it's fine, it's absolutely fine. Although it does pop out in third gear, right? Brilliant. And of course, that was the gearbox gone.
Oh. Was the pony a little golden nugget?
He was all right, actually. Yeah, he was good. He was okay. He was good for Monty.
So also you and Rosie enjoyed inventing with Emily Gilruth, who took you from Lannamunnock to Hopetown with Mullantine Royal Clover, known as Oscar.
Yeah,
that must have been great fun. Tell us about the journey and the highlights.
It was brilliant fun because Ems is just the top bird, isn't she? And Tommy is just a great mate, and so you buy into the family. So you've got Bob and Shirley, you've got Tom's auntie Rosie, you've got other owners. Claire, you had a horse, didn't you?
Yes, at a similar time.
And and you've got Imogen and Scarlett running around because they were little tots at the time, weren't they? And it's just that journey, the horse progressing, and Em's hopefully, exactly, yeah. And look, he was a proper a talented hunter, so he was never going to be a 4-star horse. But we had a really good fun journey, and we did get a few rosettes on the way, and it was great fun. I really, really enjoyed it, and then obviously sadly Emily had a tumble, and I did get a few phone calls afterwards, people saying, can we take on the horse? And I didn't want to, actually. I just wanted to be with the Gilruths. So I thought, well, let's see what happens. And then Emily, decided to retire. And so I thought, right, well, let's pack that in. And so he was quite a well-schooled hunter the following season. And he was the last horse I have sat on, actually.
He was a lovely, lovely horse.
Yeah.
Now, a lot of people over the COVID period have been racking their brains to, organise an outdoor entertaining area. But you did all this many years ago with your party barn. You were well ahead of the curve. You've had a lot of fun out of it, haven't you?
We have, yeah. We sort of converted it because it was an old dairy farm, Northwood, where Ruth and George Lear were there, and we converted the top floor of one of the outbuildings because of the kids were growing up, 2 boys, they're going to have parties, so we converted it. So we've got a bar,
probably
a
not as
dining
many
room.
parties as their parents, really.
Well, maybe not those exactly. But it's been a real success, and we've had enormous fun in there. And we had lots of hunt do's. We had the hunt lunch. The first hunt lunch was there.
Yeah, you did.
When you fell through I don't know about you, but we all fell through the trap door when we were trying to bring the food
exactly,
in. But it got better after that. It had a bit of an upgrade.
It did. But it was great fun, and still used to this day. So have a lot of fun in there.
So you'd always understood the importance of including the young and making sure they have lots of opportunities. Was it like this when you were growing up, did you find?
Yeah, I think probably, funny enough, it's probably the army, actually, because if you think about it, you're such a young man and you're given the ultimate responsibility of looking after other people's lives. And so that's encouraging of the young, isn't it?
Yes.
And I'm a believer in that. So, you don't want a bunch of old diehards at the top of any organisation. You've got to get the young to come through, and you've got because they've got different approaches, different methodology, etc., and life. So it's you've got to encourage them as much as you can and bring them. And they might not think they're ready, but they are ready.
Well, they're not
without them knowing it, they don't know
you
it.
give them the
and then you give them, and it's like anything. Is you've got to hold your nose and jump in when you're asked to be a field master for the first time. Think, am I able to do this? Am I good enough? And Richard Tyack, when he asked me, obviously thought I would be okay, and he didn't know it. I didn't know it, but thank God he did. So I'm a big advocate of helping the young and trying to get them going.
So am I.
So, Dom, both your boys are very creative and artistic. Where did they inherit this from?
Definitely their mother. Definitely.
Well, of course she is, yeah.
And so Rosebud does
flower arrangements, so florist. Done lots of that for years, and she's doing a little bit of painting now. And she's just a creative person, in that sort of, decor and things like that. So Barney, our eldest, is a freelance fashion photographer. And he's down in London, and things are going really well for him. So he's developing his own book. And then Monty is a silversmith, and so he's creating his own unisex jewellery.
Yeah, wow.
So lots of rings and bangles and chains and things like that. And again, self-taught, and he's learning how to run a business. So I'm immensely proud of both of them. They are just doing something that they're really enjoying, and how many people can say that?
Now, the boys have been very important with your conservation work on the farm, which goes hand in hand with your farm, your family shoot.
So yeah, we've got a little small family shoot, which I started when the kids were small, because I wanted them to learn about shooting. I wanted them to learn about the process, the amount of work that goes into it. So we started off by getting poults in from a game dealer, and then we did it ourselves for a couple of years, actually getting day olds and then hatching them on. And I think it is so important that they actually have an understanding of the effort and the work that goes in. So they were very much involved in the sort of keeping and the management and the helping of the shoot. And now they've got a thorough appreciation of it, which I find very gratifying. The new direction in the last few years has been Rab and Moore, which Harry Williams-Wynn very kindly allowed a few of us to create a bit of a syndicate. There were 4 of us in there to try and help the continual regeneration of Rab and Moore.
This is what a lot of people don't understand, how these moorlands are looked after, and you explain it extremely well about the necessity of the burn. Because people think that's wrong, but you explain it for us.
Well, 75% of the world's heather is in the UK, and they so they really need looking after, and you need to promote it. And part of the management of it is burning of the heather, if you can. So burning takes forward in late winter, early spring. So there's obviously no damage to sort of wildlife and things like that. But it's done at a time when it's wet. And so it's what you call a cold burn. And you choose a small area which you want to have a fire in, because you're trying to create 3 layers of heather. Very low for, regeneration, as it were. Very young heather, which shows really juicy shoots, as it were, which is the food source for red grouse. That's all they eat. And then you need some higher heather, which provides a bit of protection against the elements for the grouse to sort of hunker down in bad weather, etc.
So it's like a 3-field crop rotation.
Correct, exactly. So you want 3 areas across the board. And so burning is one of the processes. And you have to remember that moorland management, of course, is restricting the amount of heather, the fuel load, on moorland. So when we had those terrible fires at Saddleworth Moor and places like that, it's because it's unkeepered. It's rank heather, it's very tall, and it's very, very combustible in a very dry summer. And so someone, quite inadvertently gets one of those little barbecue things out, those little 2-man things, pops them in, and the heat from the tin will create a fire. Someone throws a cigarette butt out of the car window as they're going across.
The damage
and
that
it
was
goes
done.
whoosh. Exactly. Then you get the wind behind it, and then that really is it, and it's out of control. So I would argue actually that sort of the management of heather moorland is essential, because it does stop wildfires. And that's what people have got to understand, that actually having a small controlled burn helps wildfires.
And you said that there had been a vast increase in the bird life on Rab and
Huge
Moor.
benefit from it. And so there are now 20-odd pairs of curlew up there. Golden plover have returned to Raben, who haven't been there for, I think there was a gap of about 30 years. Lots and lots of lapwing. And, of course, blackgrass. And Raben, I think, has about 90% of the Welsh
black grouse population on it.
That's wonderful.
Because you're helping everything ground nesting bird, with the sort of, the vermin control. And it does need control. So
that's the skill of the keepering, isn't it, and the management?
Yeah, exactly.
Keeps it all in balance.
Yeah.
Now, we haven't touched on the world of business, which probably is pretty important for all this sporting life. How did you become a stockbroker working for Harris Allday after you left the army?
So I was just lucky. I got a job with a firm of IFAs, Independent Financial Advisors, when I left the army. And then there was a great mate who was working for Harris Allday who recruited me. And basically I did an apprenticeship. And I've been there for 25 years. And it's traditional private client stockbroking. And so you go to the same desk every day, same location, but the landscape changes. The investment world changes. So it's very gratifying. And you're dealing with individuals. People who always, everyone's got a bit of a story behind them, haven't they? You just got to find out what it is, and so it's good fun, and I enjoy it. I enjoy markets. It's fun.
So it's the personal network of clients that you enjoy.
Yes, exactly that. And the bit of advice I was given a long time ago was sort of make friends of your clients. Don't chase friends to become clients.
Yes, I love that saying.
And I think, and I broadly speaking, live by that.
So finally, when you're not doing the woodland management and everything else that you find time to do, the odd holiday, where does that take you to?
I think the favourite holiday for me is stalking. And so I first went stalking in 1994 up on the Helmsdale area, and then I joined Johnny Turner and Anna Turner, who put annual trips up to a great estate called Connor Glen up near Fort William, and we used to go up there with a great gang. So Gilroos, Tyacks, Fernals, Brettons, Brunts, Turners, and Leggett's, they were there, and just a really good fun holiday.
I'm sure there's a tale to tell from that, Dom.
Well,
Can
the one that comes to mind is the story of Eric. So basically, JT at breakfast tells the assembled crowd who's going where and who is going to be the rifle. Just like normal, exactly. Mr. Chairman, exactly. So he says, right, Gunner Curran, you're going to be number 2. Huntsman Tyat, you're number 1. So you go up in that as your pod. And depending, there were 2 beats there, one called Connor Glen, another one called Glen Scaddle. They were vast, 45,000 acres each. So you go off with your stalker, and ours was David that day. So Richard was on the rifle first, so we had a great stalk. And the gist of it is, if you take a beast early enough in the day, there's a good chance that you might have another stalk in the afternoon to get another one. Doesn't always happen, but it did happen that particular day. And Richard had shot his beast at I think it was about midday or something like that. And, I just want to touch on why you go stalking, if I may, because it's important to understand, you're not just going up there hooning away at any beast you see. You're going up there with a specific job to shoot a particular deer that the ghillie or the stalker rather wants off the hill, because you're trying to promote, culling the weak and the infirm.
It's under professional direction.
Completely, exactly that. And we've all been into positions to go in and see a ruck of stags, and there's not one in there that's ready to come off the hill. Might be too young, might be too good. So you just reverse out. So it's the ones, the sort of the switches and those sort of ones, who've just got the pointy antler, they've only got one antler, one piece, one spike.
Yes.
And of course, in the rut, that's really bad for the good boys, because you get one through the ribs or something like that, and that'll kill them. So anyway, that's the purpose of it. And anyway, so Richard had shot his beast, and we had this wonderful stalker called David. Said right, Dom, right, you're going now. And I said,
can we hear that again?
He said, it's your go now.
No.
It's your go now. And I said, what are we
David, what are we going to do? He said, we'll chase Eric. And I went, who the hell's Eric? I thought he was talking about Eric Windsor. What? Do you not like Eric Windsor? What the hell are you talking about? No, the stag, Eric. I said, what's he? He says, he's a big black beast. And I've been trying to get him for years. And I said, right, okay. Is he down that way? Because I had seen when Richard was doing his, a huge stag, which was as black as night, about 1.5 miles away, because I got these great bins. He said, yeah, we're going to go and have a go for him. And I said, what are the chances? He said, I'm nae hopeful, Dom. And I said, why are we not hopeful? He said, he's like a ghost. He just slips the net. And I said, David, have you ever got close to him? Aye, I got close to him once. And he said, the rifle got in. I said, what happened? He said, he got the fever. I said, what's the fever? He says, it's a stag fever, which is where the hands start shaking like that. He's missed him by a mile. So he'd taken a shot and they'd missed him. And he tried several times and he had just slept the net because they have fantastic eyesight. They've got brilliant hearing and a tremendous sense of smell. Anyway, so off we went. And 3.5 hours later, we had Eric on the deck, and he was a big beast. He was 21 stoner.
So was David really pleased?
Absolutely chuffed to bits. Absolutely chuffed to bits. And
what age was Eric?
Eric was probably about 10, and he was a 21 stoner. The reason why they wanted him off the hill was because he was going down in the winter into the woodland. So he was really looking after himself, and they want the beast that can tough it out on the hill.
Yes.
So anyway, Eric is now in the party barn, which is why it is called Eric's Bar, for that very reason.
I never knew that.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
Right, here we are at quickfire questions. Claire, you going to start?
Oh, I'm delighted to start with Monopoly or poker?
Monopoly.
Morning person or night owl?
Morning, definitely.
What's the strangest thing you've ever eaten?
Kangaroo.
What is your dream car?
Aston Martin DB9.
Stylish. Spring or autumn?
Spring.
Favourite sport to watch?
Cricket.
Favourite sport to do?
Tennis now.
Big dogs or small dogs?
Big.
China or Japan?
Japan.
Well, Dom, it's been so interesting hearing everything and great fun. Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you.
Finally, we ask our guests to finish with a joke or a favourite deep and meaningful saying.
But my jokes are too rude, so it has to be a saying. It's very simple. It's love life, live life.
Perfect.
Thank you to our top rider guest. He certainly sets himself to achieve a goal and completes it, and it is no surprise that he has such a following with people in all these different areas of his life. His explanation of the conservation work behind country sports was very well put, and it made it easy to understand. We need to bridge the increasing divide between the urban and rural cultures.
Yes, and I do still feel we rather glossed over the day job, as there was so much to chat about. And to think it's only recently that his office has moved to Shrewsbury. Before then, it was quite a commute to Bridge North. We love to end on a happy note, and I must return to our 7 adorable Labrador puppies. Thank you all for listening. If you've enjoyed it, please share and tell your friends.
Thank you again, Dom, and thank you, listeners. Please do press that follow button and maybe even give us a review so you won't miss our next episode, when it could be you in the driving seat.